Welcome back to Rapture Tales. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and get ready for another story you won't forget. Let's dive back to the story. The morning the world decided to change began quietly, the way most disasters do. Evelyn Carrington woke before sunrise, not because she had slept enough, but because sleep had refused to stay with her. The large bedroom of her father's estate carried a stillness she had never noticed while he was alive. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of wealth, the kind that came from distance and security, but the hollow quiet of absence. Even the antique clock on the far wall seemed to tick more loudly, as if trying to fill a space that could never be filled again. Her black dress hung on the wardrobe door, pressed to perfection by staff who had served her father for decades. Edward Carrington had believed in order, in presentation, in discipline. Even grief, he once told her, should never be messy in public. She sat on the edge of the bed for several minutes before standing. The marble floors were cold beneath her feet, the estate's heating system humming softly somewhere behind the walls. Everything still functioned exactly as it had yesterday. Except her father was gone. A knock sounded, soft, respectful. Mrs. Voss, the house manager, Eleanor, called gently. The cars will arrive in 40 minutes. Evelyn stared at the mirror before answering. Her eyes were swollen but dry now. She had already cried enough in the hospital hallway the previous night, clutching her father's hand as the machines flattened into a single unwavering tone. There had been no dramatic final words. Only a look. A long, steady look that she still didn't understand. "I'll be ready," she replied. She reached for the dresser where a small velvet box rested, one she hadn't noticed before last night. Inside was her father's old silver cufflink, engraved with a simple compass symbol. Not valuable. Not sentimental. Not even part of a pair. Her fingers tightened around it. Edward Carrington never did anything without reason. Downstairs, the estate moved like a carefully choreographed performance. Staff walked in measured silence. Fresh flowers replaced yesterday's arrangements. The front doors remained open for arriving guests who wished to offer condolences before the service. Evelyn stepped onto the staircase and paused. Sebastian Voss stood in the foyer speaking quietly with his younger brother Dominic. Both wore black suits, immaculate and expensive. Sebastian's posture was composed, reassuring even, the way it had always been since the day she met him 3 years ago at a charity architecture gala. He had been attentive without being overwhelming, confident without arrogance. A man who seemed to understand how heavy responsibility felt. He noticed her immediately. Concern crossed his face with perfect timing as he moved toward the stairs. "You should still be resting," he said softly, placing a hand over hers as she reached the last step. "You barely slept." "I won't sleep today," Evelyn answered. His grip tightened slightly, sympathetic, protective. Dominic offered a nod from behind him, though his eyes flicked briefly toward the hallway leading to her father's study. A glance so quick it might have meant nothing. Might have. Sebastian guided her toward the sitting room where relatives had begun gathering, distant cousins she barely recognized, executives from her father's company, and people whose expressions mixed grief with calculation. Wealth always drew witnesses. "You don't need to speak to everyone," Sebastian murmured. "Stay beside me." For the first time that morning, Evelyn leaned slightly into him. The stability felt necessary, expected. He had handled arrangements overnight while she remained at the hospital, signing papers, coordinating transportation, contacting attorneys, handling everything. She did not notice the brief text Dominic sent from his phone while stepping outside onto the terrace. By mid-morning, the procession of black vehicles lined the long drive beyond the iron gates. The sky remained a dull silver, heavy clouds threatening rain but never committing to it. At the cemetery, the wind carried the scent of damp earth and cut grass. Chairs were arranged in perfect rows beneath the canopy. A polished mahogany casket rested at the center, surrounded by white lilies. Her father disliked color in formal settings. Evelyn stood at the graveside barely hearing the officiant. Words about legacy drifted past her while she focused on the soil beside the grave. Freshly turned. Final. Her fingers pressed into her palm around the silver cufflink. Sebastian's hand rested on her back, steady and present. To anyone watching, he was the devoted husband holding his grieving wife upright. And several people were watching, including a sharply dressed man standing a distance away beside Theodore Lawson, her father's attorney. The stranger's gaze lingered not on the casket, but on Evelyn. She didn't know Victor Liang yet. But he already knew exactly who she was. The first shovelful of dirt struck the casket. At that same moment, far across the city, a locksmith removed the final cylinder from the penthouse door overlooking the riverside skyline. Dominic Cross stood beside the building manager, signing paperwork with a steady hand. "Authorization confirmed," the manager said. "Ownership transfer documentation was submitted this morning." Dominic smiled faintly and dialed his brother. "It's done." Evelyn did not hear the phone vibrate in Sebastian's pocket when the dirt hit the casket. She only heard the hollow thud repeating again and again, each impact final in a way words never were. People began stepping forward one at a time, offering condolences that blurred together, hands squeezing hers, voices softened by obligation rather than intimacy. Her attention drifted to Theodore Lawson speaking quietly with the unfamiliar man she had noticed earlier. The stranger's posture was respectful but watchful, as if attending not merely to mourn but to verify something. Sebastian leaned toward her ear. "We'll leave soon. You've done enough." She nodded faintly, though her eyes stayed fixed on the grave until the last shovelful fell. Only when the workers began lowering the temporary canopy did she allow herself to step back. As they walked toward the waiting cars, she felt Sebastian's grip tighten briefly, then relax, the subtle rhythm of someone receiving information while maintaining composure. He opened the car door for her. "Let's go home." The word home felt solid then. Predictable. It would not remain so for long. The drive through the city passed in silence, broken only by the soft hum of tires over wet pavement. Rain had finally begun, tracing slow lines across the window beside Evelyn's cheek. She leaned against the glass, watching the skyline approach, the river cutting silver between towers of steel and glass. Her phone vibrated with a message from Lila Monroe. "I'm at the apartment tonight if you need quiet. Call me anytime." Evelyn typed a simple thank you but didn't send it. She intended to go home. She needed familiarity. She needed something that hadn't changed. Sebastian rested a hand over hers. "I spoke with the firm this morning," he said gently. "You don't need to think about business matters for a while." "My father never stopped working," she replied. He'd expect you to breathe," Sebastian interrupted softly. "And I'll handle everything else." His tone held comfort, yet something beneath it felt rehearsed, too smooth, too perfectly timed. She pushed the thought aside. Grief distorted perception. That was all. Ahead, their building came into view, the riverside penthouse occupying the top floors, a property her father had insisted they live in after the wedding. He had called it strategic proximity, though she never understood proximity to what. The car slowed to the curb. The doorman approached, hesitating just slightly before opening her door. They entered the lobby, marble echoing beneath their steps. The receptionist offered a sympathetic expression but avoided meeting Evelyn's eyes. The elevator ride felt unusually long, numbers climbing in silent increments toward the top floor. When the doors opened, Evelyn stepped into the familiar private corridor, then stopped. The doormat was gone. So was the brass Carrington nameplate her father had installed himself. In its place hung a polished steel plate engraved with a single name. Voss. She frowned, confused. "Did you replace?" Her keycard met the reader. Red light. She tried again. Red. Sebastian remained still behind her. A slow unease crawled into her chest as she turned the handle. The door did not move. "What happened to the lock?" she asked quietly. Sebastian exhaled, almost relieved, as if a long performance had reached its final line. "I changed it this morning." The hallway felt suddenly colder. "You changed it?" Her voice barely held shape. "Why?" He reached into his coat and held up a new key, not offering it. "Because this property now belongs to me." For a moment the words made no sense. They hovered, disconnected from reality. "That's not possible. My father signed it over before he died," Sebastian said evenly. "He believed you weren't prepared to manage assets of this scale. He trusted me to protect them." The world narrowed to the steel door between them. "You're lying." He shook his head calmly. "The documentation has already been processed. Building management has the transfer confirmation." Her pulse pounded in her ears. "Sebastian, open the door." "No." The single syllable landed harder than any shout. "You need time away from this place," he continued, tone almost gentle. "I've arranged for your belongings to be packed and delivered wherever you decide to stay. For now." It's better if you go. Her breath left her in a sharp, disbelieving laugh. You're locking me out. Today. I'm protecting what's mine. She stared at him, at the man who had held her hand at the grave less than an hour earlier. The elevator chimed behind them, echoing down the empty corridor. She did not remember pressing the call button or descending. She only realized she was outside when cold rain struck her face and she was standing on the sidewalk without her coat. The driver had already gone. No one from the building followed. Her phone shook in her hands as she finally sent Lila the message. Can I come now? The reply arrived instantly. I'm on my way. Evelyn stood beneath the building awning watching the windows of the penthouse high above. Lights turned on one by one across the top floor, her floor, while the rain blurred them into distant stars. Lila's apartment smelled like coffee and paint thinner, the usual aftermath of her freelance design projects. She didn't ask questions immediately, only draped a blanket around Evelyn's shoulders and set a mug in her hands. Silence stretched comfortably until Evelyn could finally speak. He said my father gave it to him. Lila's expression hardened. And you believed that? I don't know what to believe. They sat across from each other at the small kitchen table while evening deepened outside. For the first time that day, Evelyn allowed herself to feel the tremor running through her hands. My father looked at me last night, she whispered. Like he was trying to warn me about something he couldn't say. Lila leaned forward. Then we find out what. The next morning Theodore Lawson called asking to meet immediately. His office overlooked the financial district, shelves lined with meticulously labeled binders. He closed the door before speaking. There's information you need, he said carefully. Your husband is mistaken about the penthouse. Evelyn's heartbeat quickened. Mistaken how? The property was never owned by your father. Silence settled thick between them. It belongs to Victor Liang, Theo continued. A private development partner who requested discretion. Your father allowed you to live there under a personal arrangement. There was never a transfer available to sign. Evelyn stared at him, understanding dawning slowly. Then Sebastian, illegally claimed a residence he has no legal authority over. The ground shifted beneath grief, forming something sharper. What else did my father prepare? She asked. Theo slid a sealed envelope across the desk. A safeguard. Inside were transaction logs, bank transfers, and messages printed in meticulous order. Lines of numbers leading from company accounts into hidden shells controlled by Sebastian. Embezzlement. Beneath them, photographs. Sebastian entering a restaurant with a woman Evelyn recognized, Sabrina Vale, a consultant from her own firm. Her hands stopped shaking. They think I'm powerless, she said quietly. Theo watched her carefully. What do you intend to do? Evelyn closed the envelope. Nothing. He frowned. Not yet, she clarified. He believes he's already won. I want him comfortable. Days passed. She moved carefully, staying with Lila while quietly contacting Daniel Mercer at the firm under the pretense of reviewing operational continuity. He confirmed irregularities Edward had been investigating but never finalized. With his help, she traced additional unauthorized withdrawals, Dominic's gambling debts hidden through Laird accounts. Meanwhile, Sebastian hosted a gathering at the penthouse to celebrate his transition into leadership, unaware that every move widened the evidence around him. Evelyn stood across the street that night, watching guests enter the building she was locked out of. Her reflection in the glass showed someone steadier than the woman at the graveside. She dialed a number Theo had given her. Mr. Liang, she said when the call connected, voice calm. We need to discuss the illegal occupants in your property. Victor Liang did not interrupt her while she spoke. The line remained quiet except for the faint ambience of traffic on his end, as though he had stepped outside to take the call. Evelyn explained only what mattered: the penthouse, the false claim of ownership, the change of locks, and the celebration being held inside it that very night. When she finished, several seconds passed before he answered. I was told the residence was still under private occupancy, he said calmly. I was not told it had been seized. It wasn't yours to give, she replied. And it wasn't his to take. Another pause, heavier this time, carrying calculation. Send me the documentation your attorney showed you. If what you're saying is accurate, the situation will be corrected immediately, but not recklessly. Timing matters in matters like this. She understood. Rash exposure would only push Sebastian to hide what they still needed. "Then we'll do it properly," she said. Across the street, laughter spilled from the penthouse balcony doors high above the city. She ended the call and watched the lights for a long time before turning away. Over the following week, Evelyn moved with careful precision. By day, she met Daniel Mercer inside quiet cafes rather than the office, reviewing ledgers on a laptop that never connected to company servers. The deeper they traced the accounts, the clearer the pattern became. Sebastian had been siphoning modest amounts over time, never enough to trigger alarms, but together forming a substantial theft. Dominic's debts appeared in coded payments disguised as vendor consultations. At night, she met Theodore Lawson to catalogue everything. Each piece was dated, labelled, cross-referenced. Her grief gradually reshaped itself into focus. She slept little, yet her exhaustion no longer came from mourning but from purpose. One afternoon, a courier delivered a small key box Theo had arranged access to, a bank safety deposit under Edward Carrington's name. Inside rested neatly bound journals written in her father's precise hand. Not memories, not sentiment, records. Observations about Sebastian's growing influence, doubts about certain transactions, contingency planning in case Edward died before confronting him. Tucked beneath the final volume lay an envelope of emergency cash and a short note: "Trust patience over reaction." Evelyn closed the box gently. "I understand," she whispered. The next target revealed itself when she reviewed calendar overlaps in Sebastian's messages. Repeated late meetings with Sabrina Vale scheduled during her fiancé's hospital shifts. Lila volunteered immediately when Evelyn mentioned needing confirmation. 2 evenings later, Lila returned with quiet satisfaction, setting her phone on the table to play a recording taken from the restaurant bar behind them. Not intimate enough to be invasive, but clear enough to show familiarity far beyond professional boundaries. Sabrina's hand rested comfortably over Sebastian's while they discussed travel plans that did not include their respective partners. Evelyn watched once, then locked the file away. "That alone could end him," Lila said. "Not yet," Evelyn replied. "It's only one thread." Dominic unraveled faster. Creditors began calling the firm asking for Sebastian when payments stalled. One particularly impatient collector visited the office demanding resolution. Grace Holloway discreetly notified Evelyn, who arrived just long enough to witness Dominic's composure fracture in the hallway as he promised money he did not have. She didn't confront him. She simply documented. Later that night, she forwarded the relevant financial trails to Detective Amelia Reyes through Theo's channels, requesting review but not action. The investigator acknowledged receipt with a single line: "When you're ready." Everything was aligning: ownership violation, fraud, accomplice liability, personal motive. But Evelyn waited. Dr. Elias Rowan learned the truth on a quiet afternoon between surgeries. Evelyn requested a meeting under the pretense of discussing a charitable partnership her father once funded through the hospital. She brought only the recording and a simple explanation. She did not dramatize. She did not accuse. She allowed him to watch. He remained still until the end. "How long have you known?" he asked. "Long enough to let you decide what to do with honesty." His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed controlled. "Thank you for not humiliating me publicly." She nodded once and left. Behind her, a relationship dissolved without spectacle, another piece removed from Sebastian's support structure. Victor Liang finally chose the date. He contacted her through Theo with a brief message: "This Friday evening. Be nearby but not inside." Sebastian had planned another gathering, investors this time, confident in his expanding authority. As twilight deepened over the river, guests filled the penthouse once more. Music drifted through open balcony doors while city lights glittered below. Evelyn waited across the street beside Lila, Theo, and 2 uniformed officers speaking quietly with Detective Reyes. A third vehicle arrived minutes later carrying Victor Liang and an additional legal representative. "Ready?" the detective asked. Evelyn looked up at the windows that had once been her home, then nodded. The elevator doors opened into celebration. Conversations halted as uniformed presence entered behind Victor Liang. Sebastian stepped forward, confusion sharpening into irritation. "You can't just walk in." "I can," Victor replied evenly. "Because this is my property." Documents were presented. The building manager confirmed records. Silence collapsed into murmurs as realization spread among the guests. Detective Reyes addressed Sebastian directly. "We also have warrants regarding financial crimes and fraudulent transfer activity connected to Carrington Consulting." Dominic attempted to leave through the corridor but was intercepted. Sabrina stood frozen near the bar, her phone lighting repeatedly with calls she did not answer. Sebastian looked once toward the door, and saw Evelyn standing beyond the threshold. Understanding finally reached his eyes. "You planned this," he said. She met his gaze calmly. "No, you did." Officers moved forward, reading charges while conversations turned to stunned whispers. The celebration ended in handcuffs and flashing lights reflected across the river. Months later the courtroom remained orderly as Judge Hensley delivered sentencing. Evidence left little argument. Sebastian Voss received 10 years for embezzlement and fraud. Dominic followed on lesser but significant counts. Evelyn listened without triumph. Only closure. Outside, autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves as Theo handed her the finalized estate transfer, Edward's legitimate assets now fully hers, along with leadership of Carrington Consulting. She immediately retained Grace and Daniel in expanded roles and initiated restructuring plans her father had outlined but never enacted. A year after the funeral she stood at a smaller memorial overlooking a public housing complex newly completed through partnership with Victor Liang's development firm. Children played in the courtyard where empty land once sat unused. Olivia Grant, her therapist, waited nearby with Lila among a modest gathering of colleagues and community leaders. Evelyn placed the silver cufflink at the base of a plaque bearing Edward Carrington's name, not on a tower, but on homes built to last. Grief no longer felt like weight. It felt like foundation. She looked around at the life rebuilt, honest partnerships, quiet friendships, work that mattered, and breathed steadily for the first time since that morning in the silent estate. She had lost a husband, an illusion, and a past. But she had gained herself. That's all for today. Like, subscribe, and see you in the next episode. Stay tuned.